Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Corinne, for being here this morning. And thank to everybody that's joining us for this very important moment, and a special moment. Corinne, on to you. Where are you and how's it going?
I'm in my garage where I do all my biodesign projects with youth. And greetings from California. Thank you for saying good morning. I know it's afternoon for you.
Oh yeah, it is. Sorry, I didn't realize. Like, yeah, 12:28. Correct. Yes, that's
It's
true.
such a privilege and honor to be talking with the fairy godmother of biodesign.
Oh, thank you. I feel that I really am. No, it's biodesign is really important, and I have to say I feel privileged to have been around since, well, not really the start, because in a way we've been doing biodesign for centuries, but this particular moment where things have accelerated. And I'm also very happy to be speaking with you and to be breathing the same air as the Biodesign Challenge participants, because I am always observing things and passing judgment and sometimes supporting, giving new baselines. But you are really on the front lines, both as an artist and as an educator. And I have to say, the two flow into each other. And even though, even here, I'm not really following script, but I wanted to really speak with you about something important. I just said that we've been doing biodesign for centuries, which means that we have developed traditions in cultures, in material cultures all over the world. And the beauty of your work is that you get to work with students that are from other cultures, and therefore you get to experience this bridge. I wanted to I wanted you to tell the audience about this particular feature of your work as an educator and as an artist.
Certainly. But I want to thank you. I'm supposed to be interviewing you, and you're so gracious turning this to what the work that I'm doing. I have questions for you as well, but yeah, I'll address that. I am the daughter of a designer who grew up on a plantation on Maui in Hawaii, and he's from Japanese American descent. My mom is Irish Southerner from the South. And so I had a material vocabulary of different cultures just growing up. And in my art practice and my teaching practice with youth, I work with students in Hawaii, in East San Jose, and other states. And it is always such an opportunity to bring in people's own cultural lenses and practices from their cultures, past practices with biology. So I think a lot of times communities with lower access to be involved in science conversations and biology and that conversation at the intersection of art and technology need that opportunity to see how they can talk to their grandparents or look in their community for the materials that are being used. So for example, I use a lot of food materials from different cultures. In my own culture, this is agar. Agar, we use it in desserts, Japanese desserts. In Hawaii, we look at Polynesian practices of long sea voyages and food packaging and how was that done, and systems design. And as part of Shinampa, I'm learning about really wonderful past practices of the floating gardens of Shinampas, and just the wonderful opportunities to look more broadly across cultures as we design innovation.
You're so lucky to be all that. I'm Italian and New Yorker. Those two things that come together. That's quite beautiful.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, I know that you have called yourself a curator and reporter. And as such, I'm just curious if you could answer the question that everyone was posed at the invitation. So what is biodesign to you?
Well, it's always a very, very, very big question, because the first part of it is to understand what design is, which is impossible because it's a little bit like asking what art is. And biodesign, however, if we consider design as being a coming together of a goals and means towards this particular synthesis, biodesign makes tangible and understandable the biology that we cannot see. And through art, we can make it visible and even, between quotes, employable by the rest of the world. So it really is about a way to bring nature into a design process that's existed for centuries. And my beloved friend Mary Oxman is online. She just texted me, and she's a master at that. We can talk about that afterwards and what she does afterwards. But truly, biodesign is the future, and it is a lot to me and a lot to the world, and that's what I aspire to explain. What about you? What is biodesign to you?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say I love how you frame it as making biology visible, the invisible components of nature visible, because biology, I think, as it's highlighted in a lot of your exhibits, is like how can we interface with it at different scales? Because we have such a narrow lens as humans of what biology is. But I think I like that idea of making the invisible visible through design.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, I really love that. I think for me, as an educator, it's storytelling. So biodesign is storytelling and slow making at the intersection of with nature, at the intersection of design, culture, and of course biology. So it's this intersectionality that you explore with storytelling and slow making because it takes time to grow.
And how long ago did you start both practicing and teaching biodesign?
um, so I was introduced to biodesign, contemporary biodesign by Anya Schultz at the Tech Interactive in San Jose. And she was working with MicroWorks with mycelium. And I was so excited to see built structures that were grown in collaboration with organisms. And it's just so exciting. And that was only maybe 3 years ago.
Ross and everybody else, huh? But already it was just a few years ago, but it's amazing how far it's come, right? Because
Yes.
you mentioned Michael Works, some of the pioneers, because in a way, in the field of biodesign, there are some stars, so mushroom mycelium is one, agar is another one, then there's seaweed, silkworms, there are a few, and bees, there are a few real pillars of biodesign. These are just, E. coli also. There's several, but it's quite amazing to see how far the field has come. You call it contemporary. So some of the I would like to mention here amongst all of these aficionados, some of the pillars from Symbiotica and Oron Katz and Yonat Zur, who started in Perth in Western Australia 20 plus years ago. Then we can talk about Suzanne Lee, that really made the discipline tangible and visible, not only with her Biofabricate conference, but even before that, by showing that you can actually make objects and clothes and garments out of bio design. I mean, there are a few of these amazing pioneers, but then the field itself has become more rooted in education and in business quite recently. It must be like 6, 7 years ago, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm so new to it, really. I just started doing education with it a couple years ago. And the way I anchor into it is through sustainability design. So it started with a camp maybe 3 years ago at Foothill Community College. It was a teen summer camp where we explored sustainability design with organisms. And then I started teaching summer camps in East San Jose with AYA, Alliance for Youth Achievement, and now exploring with Shinampa and BioJam as a camp that we run at Stanford. Um, but I'm really curious too, like I know questions change over time. And so I was curious about the questions that drove you to develop Broken Nature. And then
Broken nature. Mm-mm.
and then after it closed, did it surface additional questions or what were the new conversations or
Sure.
questions afterwards?
So Broken Nature was the 22nd Triennale di Milano, and I'm from Milan. And actually, that building, the Triennale building, is where I started my whole career as a golfer in my 20s. So it was really an emotional moment when I was given the Triennale. And the Triennale has always been about what architecture and design can offer to society in particular moments. And at this moment, it is, I mean, right now we have another crisis that's taking our attention, but the environmental crisis is underlaying it all, and it's really very important. And I decided to focus on that, and in particular to offer some possible solutions that could be open to citizens, not only to designers. So the idea behind Broken Nature was quite simple. I mean, the large idea was, as a human species, we will become extinct. We might as well think of our legacy and design a really elegant extinction. So do the best that we can within these limitations. But also I wanted to offer this idea of restorative design. And restorative design is a big umbrella that encompasses recycling, reusing, circular economy, working with nature, the kind of material ecology that Mary Oxman does, biodesign. So everything together to have a more copacetic and responsible and aware relationship with the world that we inhabit, other species, other planets, and that was for citizens. So Broken Nature was about that. It had a narrative arc that might be too long to express here, but we really wanted, with my curatorial team, Ala Tanir, Erica Petrillo, and Laura Mairan, we wanted to give citizens a sense of long time, number one. Secondly, a sense of the fact that we live in systems. Therefore, we need to know our place within these ecosystems. And the third goal was to make sure that everyone left the exhibition with a sense of what they could do in everyday life. And I have to say, you're asking me what's left after Broken Nature. Where the most important outcome personally that I learned is that you need to move people emotionally in order for them to act. And that was the most memorable kind of feedback that I got, was that many people found the exhibition moving, and that the kids that were doing Fridays for the Future, that they were striking from schools on Friday to raise awareness about the climate crisis, were meeting at the Triennale to start their protests. So it gives me
Oh,
shivers
wow.
still. Yeah, it was a big deal. To me,
Wow.
it was really a big deal because of this kind of reaction.
That's wonderful. Yeah, storytelling, the importance of storytelling and moving people. That's beautiful. That's where the protest starts.
Yeah,
That's
and I know
beautiful.
that storytelling is important also for you. That's what I also like about artists and educators like you, or like Suzanne Anker, who pioneered wet labs in schools and this kind of biodesign here in New York. You really also rely on the storytelling
Yeah,
to help students, and to help students also tell their stories, right?
absolutely. I mean, we all have stories. We all have family we can talk to. We actually all do biodesign. And if you anchor into cooking and cooking practices first, that's really a great way to engage students and help them want to be bio explorers. Um, so I think in this chat, we're talking also about past, present, and future of biodesign. So I want to ask you something kind of more current. And you've already brought up Neri Oxman's show, Material Ecology. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about that journey. And you've described the show with 5 adjectives before. You've been challenged to do that. And you described it as experimental, organic, visionary, genius, and hopeful. And I would love for you to speak to the hopeful part of that. Why is it hopeful?
Definitely, definitely. In many ways, first of all, the Neri Oxman exhibition is right now open and closed at MoMA. We were lucky to have it with us physically for 3 weeks before we had to follow. Well, actually, we didn't even follow. We closed before we were ordered to, because we were concerned for our public and our staff. But the exhibition is there, and hopefully we'll be able to host you all back in it physically. And even if we didn't, we're going to have on May 14th a conversation live between Neri and me at MoMA, and you'll be able to see more then. But the exhibition is very, very hopeful because it shows, as is typical of Neri's work and the Mediated Matter Group's work. The Mediated Matter Group is the group at MIT that Neri has founded and that she works with. It shows how we can build or grow our living environment in a more copacetic way with nature. Because, we've been doing organic design since the beginning of times. We've been trying to imitate nature because nature does it best, right? Nature builds best, grows best, and also destroys best, right? So Neri shows with her work that we can not only imitate nature, but also work with nature and follow the life cycles of nature, even in the way we construct our world. And therefore, we will be able to also follow the biological scope of nature in a better way. And material ecology shows how design can be done by marrying it in a fluid and metabolic way, also with engineering, with science in particular, synthetic biology, and with additive manufacturing. So in a way, the reason why I really love Mary's work and always espouse it as my own philosophy too is because she uses the most advanced technology at our disposal, the most advanced additive manufacturing, the most advanced computation to really be able to pay tribute to nature and to allow nature to let us in.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I was so excited when we had talked earlier, and you had mentioned her work in the exhibit and the Silk Pavilion. And I, as an educator, when I saw that on the MIT Media Lab's website a few years ago, was so excited. I created a simplified version of that with super simplified laser cut cardboard strips with holes in it. And so students could take silk thread and create their own structures and then grow silkworms in it. And it was so inspiring to have something
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
wonderful, isn't it? I mean, I was obsessed with it too. So the first time we showed Neri's work was in an exhibition called Design in the Elastic Mind in 2008. But then Neri and I became friends, became partners in crime, and we've been obsessing on having a second version of the Silk Pavilion at MoMA forever. And that's why in this new exhibition, we have a new Silk Pavilion that's different from the first one, because instead of being dictated geometrically, it's much more organic, and the silkworms participate not only as construction workers, but also as architects. So I really hope you'll be able to all see it.
I do too. And I'm curious, how are you feeding them? Because in California right now, the mulberry leaves are just starting to come in. So are they being fed? Is someone the silkworm wrangler feeder?
Well, that's what Neri and I originally wanted to do, to have the whole silkworm positioning at MoMA, but we couldn't do it because for this new silk pavilion, we needed many, many silkworms, 17,000. And there's not enough, yeah, exactly. There's not enough viable silkworms since there's no silk industry in the United States. The whole system of mulberry trees, silkworms, capacity, etc., does not exist. So Neri and the Mediated Matter group, brothers and sisters, um, realized it in Padua, near Padua in Abano Terme, where there is the center that studies silkworms and the production of silk. It's a worldwide important center, and it got made there. The Silk Pavilion got made there. And if you come to the exhibition, you will see, or even without coming to the exhibition, you can walk on 53rd Street and you will see the video. It shows how the Silk Pavilion was made there, and then it was slightly shrunk, not too much, and transported and brought over to the United States, to Queens, and then to New York. But we would have loved to make it happen. And actually, if the museum had been open, we would have had several workshops with the education department to have kids and people, why only kids, handle silkworms, because silkworms are fabulous. And it's very funny to see the reaction of different people in the exhibition. You realize that certain cultures in the world, Chinese and Asian in particular, and then also Italians, are used to silkworms, so love them and get endeared by them. And instead, oh, also Israelis, I think, and instead, Americans tend to be kind of creeped out at first, especially because the silkworms are projected really big on the walls of MoMA, and then instead they get more familiar. So it's fascinating also to see the cultural take on it.
I love how you brought that up in terms of familiarity with organisms. And I think exhibits like the one you're describing can make people excited, like blending the familiar with the foreign, the familiar of ideas or structures, and then realize it was bio-built. It was made by these things, that these worms that maybe are larvae that they're not usually familiar with. And I think the same goes with some other model organisms that might be very important for system solutions in the future. When we talk about bacteria and algae and fungus, mealworms, uh, and as you said, as you look across different cultures, those are already present as part of diet, as part of solutions. You can just look at the jade artifacts in China and Japan. Sometimes they'll create a jade bok choy, and it has a creature crawling on it. Like the artist decided to put that in because it's beautiful. It's part of that system. It's part of the, you know, the life and decay. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
like that very much too. You're completely right. And I really hope that it's going to happen even more in the future. What I like about education, now you're working with high schoolers, I hope we'll be able to work really even with kids with biodesign, because to have we have the citizen scientist labs that Daniel Grushkin was so instrumental in releasing into the world. I hope we will have also the citizen biodesigners. I mean, they already are doing it, and they don't know enough. They don't realize that they are doing it already. As you said, whenever we create yogurt or kombucha, or whenever we cook, we're doing some biodesign. I hope that an awareness will develop. And I really like the efforts of there's this foundation in Arles in France, the Luma Foundation, and what they're doing, I'm just thinking of them as an example. They're creating this biofab labs. The fab labs were this idea of bringing 3D printing to the whole world so that people locally could develop the tools that they needed. And the Luma Foundation is trying to do the same with seaweed and algae, because algae are a byproduct of our polluting streams and are oversaturating our streams with phosphorus. And they are teaching people to take their algae and create bioplastics out of them that then can be 3D printed into local material culture vessels and objects, which is quite beautiful. And all these efforts at circularity, at sustainability, at responsibility, at empathy with nature is what I think biodesign taught in a more massive way could really engender.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think back to my Biodesign Challenge team last year, the GIY Bio Buddies, and working with youth who didn't have any exposure to biodesign. Two of them actually didn't even have high school biology yet. Met here in my garage and we figured out how to do a BSL level 1 lab space here. Um, and really looked at leveraging, like, how can we explore things in a circular way? What were things that they were interested in? And by the time they exited the project 8 months later, they said that they really felt like they had started off as artists and makers, but they left the program feeling that they were biomakers, bioexplorers, actually is what they said, bioexplorers and educators. And so I think hearing about what you were talking about, taking algae and doing cultural artifacts, is putting the power in the hands of the people to take ideas and biology and push it into directions that are relevant to them, whether it's their age group. My team last year did bio toy kits, and they were basically part of their user group. Or as you were mentioning, taking algae and doing bioplastics and applying it to your local needs and to your own cultural vocabulary of materials. I think that's really important. I think that's, to me, the exciting part of biodesign.
So, how do we get people outside of our small cohort? How do we get people comfortable with biodesign? Like, for instance, I've had some interesting issues at MoMA. I tried, well, we did actually acquire into the collection the Autodesk software generated virus. We acquired it with a 3D printed model. It's almost as if you were acquiring architecture. You can never acquire the real thing. You cannot acquire a virus, you cannot acquire a building, but you can acquire a representation thereof. But so I know how I have to deal with my acquisitions committee or my visitors. But what about you? Have you ever wanted to work with elementary school kids or even kindergarten kids? And would you be allowed to?
Yes, actually, I have. So with the GIY Bio Buddies last year, they did community workshops. So I feel like I'm working in my garage. I'm not embedded in a school. So what are the opportunities to collaborate? And opportunities are with other institutions. So whether they're museums or community labs, community gardens, after school programs, those are the ones that we intersect with. And so my team last year went out and did youth programming. One of them was with younger kids, like elementary and middle school students. and also with families. So I think that's another opportunity. So they were really fortunate to work with the Tech Interactive and in their biotinkering lab, bring in their bacteriocellulose kaleidoscopes, paper doll dressing activity. And then they had this 3D printed Lego wings that you could skin with bacteriocellulose and add little wheels. So you're kind of making these insects with a mix of traditional Lego pieces and 3D printed insect wings. And so I think the way to engage with youth is in these informal spaces, learning spaces, is open-ended activities where you're bringing the biomaterial already grown. Uh, it may be unfamiliar, but they make something with it, so all of a sudden it becomes theirs, and then the parents are helping. And again, another thing I think that's helpful is to work with food grade biomaterials. So we always tell the parents, this was grown with kombucha drink that was bought in the store, or agar that was bought at the Japanese market. So trying to stick with supply chains and sources that are within the food realm as opposed to the biosourcing scientific realm.
And tell me, have you had any chance? We're in the era of the coronavirus. I mean, it's a moment of big tragedy. People hear virus and they immediately think of this illustration by Alyssa Eckert. And I don't remember the other co illustrator, but they work with the CDC, and they're the ones that exasperated the S proteins that made it into this monster hellraiser. How have you had conversations right now about what you do teaching biodesign and about biodesign and the coronavirus?
Um, just starting to. So working with Shinampa, the nonprofit that I'm a part of, and that's anchored in Salinas. Um, and actually, one of their co-founders, Rolando Perez, is our biodesign challenge mentor this year for my team, my current team, which is anchored in East San Jose. Um, he and I and the Shinampa team have been talking about that because there's certain communities that not only need to become more aware of these conversations, our essential field workers in the Central Valley and the Central Coast who are now going into strawberry picking season but don't have the protection that they need. How do we bring in these communities into the design conversation of their gloves, their masks, everything that they need to protect themselves? But you can't do that unless you educate and draw in their expertise about coronavirus issues. So I think it opens up opportunities, hopefully, to expand the
Mm-hmm.
conversation and empower people, even though this is such a horrible thing to be going through. There are issues in these that can surface that existed before these coronavirus
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah. It is very interesting. I mean, from my viewpoint, I see a lot of conversations here amongst artists. There are artists like Anika Yi that are really speaking about it openly. And it's funny because I run a MoMA R&D, a kind of research and development lab at MoMA that is not scientific, it's more conceptual about the museum's involvement in society. And we planned these salons, and I was planning one together with Sam Ozer and Theanosia Raferas, who work with me. We were planning one on contagion and contamination, believe it or not, before the coronavirus. And yeah, no, I dropped it. We will reprise it afterwards. It's not a good time right now to talk about it because there's too much white noise and because it's so heated. But I see that the conversation is happening. Nobody's really scared or having any violent reactions right now. The idea of talking about it, I think we're all still in this kind of, I don't want to use the word, but I need to. Well, I was saying feverish, but now I'm going to say drunken moment. I mean, we're kind of shell shocked by the whole situation. And I think that thinking of the positive aspects of the word viral is not a good time yet.
Yeah.
But uh, but I like very much to think of how we will debunk all the wrong ideas. Like, for instance, this idea that viruses are live beings as opposed to biological machines. It's quite interesting. There's a lot that I feel you and I, from our different angles, will need to debunk and to think about. I am really interested right now about the role. One of the roles that I've taken at MoMA right now, I'm part of this crisis management team that is thinking of how we will reopen, thinking of how we will reopen not as the first museum to reopen, but as the safest. We're just thinking of all these different viewpoints. And in particular, I am offering the design angle, the biodesign angle, and also a little bit of the bio art angle. So I'm really looking forward to many ideas from the community.
Oh, that's wonderful. And thank you for all that you've done to guide us and inspire the broader community in thinking about these questions. And I think now is the opportunity to think about biology, the invisible biology. And you've done such a great job in sparking that interest and that imagination. So thank you so much, all you've done for the Biodesign Challenge, as well as for us independent educators. So thank you.
No, listen, we all work, we're all working also in a system. I love the fact that you've spoken about systems too. And Biodesign Challenge is extremely important. So I thank everybody that's online today. I thank you for your support of this discipline and also of this institution of Biodesign Challenge. I hope that you will continue supporting it in the future, that you will participate as educators, that you will help fund it, because truly this is the direction for the future. It's a direction for the future that, as usual, because it is so fresh, has not yet solidified itself, and therefore it needs all of our brain and all of our support to continue. So thank you for honoring me today. Thank you, Corinne, for the work that you do. And thank you, Dan Grushkin, and all of your wonderful team that is online today for everything that you've done. Alex, Jeff, everyone, Erin, thanks a lot.
Thank you. This has been such a great pleasure. Thank you so much.